Yeah.
Okay, the recording started.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Saturday, May 3rd at 9 a.m. So she calls to order. As of right now, we have some of our board members to be joining us shortly. The local Dr. Constantine, Superintendent.
Dave Larson, District 5.
Welcome to all of our guests. Doing us interested online. Early wake up. Yeah. All right. So if I could get a motion to approve our agenda this morning.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So we do have an opportunity for public comment. It is after the meeting today. Or at the end, we have an end. Okay, unless we can amend the agenda, sorry. Okay, yeah, okay. All right.
You actually you can amend, well, oh, the agenda is approved. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 3 presentations that is up for discussion today. The first is our fiscal presentation. We're focused on the board goal, our third board goal, which is about financial sustainability, particularly once we move past the financial issues.
Good morning, everybody. CFO She/Her. So at the last work session, we went through a portion of this PowerPoint. So just as a little bit of historical, the first part of this session we talked about balance policy. We decided 6% revenue with the addition of that additional language of the definitions of what balance is. The second part was the different graphs that we can provide in the future for financing reporting in order to help better perform and provide you some information. So I just wanted to make sure that there were no questions in those 2 sections before we move on to the rest of the presentation.
So I guess we had that big discussion about revenue versus expenditures. Turned out, I guess, what we agreed to is revenue, but our binding conditions actually expenditures.
Yes.
Okay. But your assessment was a lot of it.
Yeah, I think the set aside is going to be a little bit higher, but so it just provides a little bit more cushion for us to actually percent. When we do the calculations for this period, it is based on working to improve financial statements.
Should say 4%.
Excuse me, yeah, it's 4% right now on the conditions. And so that's what has to be over to the yeah. So different than the so we do still need to strive because that's 60%. So if we can go to page 21. So the next section of the report and the conversations that were in the potential for the board was the OSPI financial indicators. And so one of the requests, or one of the items on the consideration is to review the OSPI financial indicators. So this is a report established by OSPI. It always looks at previous years data. So by the time they post this, it's usually end March to provide financial indicators, and it's used for purposes to making sure that districts are on track and other factors that could put district at risk. So they'll use that information and then put districts on watch if their ratio is low.
Sorry, interruption. So it comes out in March for the previous school year.
Yes.
So yeah, just to be clear, this is not gonna be a preventative one, this is kind of after the fact.
Correct.
Hopefully we don't, I mean, we've not, in the past, we've not really looked at this much, and I think it's just another check in the system to say, if we overlook all the other ones, we get here, that
Yeah, this is. Yeah, so usually, once you're in this, they'll use the previous year's information to launch. And they've just started doing this, just this district. They've always posted this information, and this information's been posted. But OSPI is really starting to pay attention to this more and more, just because of the number of districts that have run into the conditions. There's some real big indicators that will make OSPI now that they're paying more attention to some of the data. So one of the first areas that they look at is the fund balance to budget ratio. And so what they use, this is used as the percentage of a district's revenue currently has resources. And so basically it's the divisor of how much revenue to the fund balance we have comes up with a percentage. The second component that they look at is expenditure to revenue ratio. And so are expenditures greater or less than the revenue that's flowed? The third is the days of cash on hand. And so it measures the days of a district that can operate on all funding programs. And a lot of districts have issues in this area, as well. And then the fourth one, which I find interesting, is the 4-year budget plan side. The measure the number of years district have reported negative finance. So this one is a little bit more subjective in my opinion. I feel like doing a 4-year budget projection, districts, CFOs are going to be going through the process to say, we will always work to make sure that we have funds. And so I find this ratio a little bit interesting. So just my personal.
and it's also the lowest.
It is low.
These are all weighted first year. That's fine.
Much higher. I just think that there could have been an old ratio. But anyway, that's a little bit more telling. So what they do is then they take a value and all of the indicators like yours. And so the first two are weighted higher than the next two. So the next page gives you a summary. So this is actually OSPI's webpage. It just provides you the information, what it is, and then it will go through and provide the data of how the points are scored in each of the categories and the weighting that they use. And so I've pulled this directly from OSPI's webpage, just so that you can see what the needs are. So if we go to page 26, this is the data for Tukwila. And it's always a 5-year view of information. So they provide historical data over 5 years. And so as you can see, they have posted the 2024 school year. And that just gives you where we are. So in 22-23, obviously we were in financial warning because we were in a flat balance. This year, as we ended the year, we have improved to 1.8 weighted average, which is a significant improvement, and it's very close to the 2.2.
Which also, I believe, this is out of the financial warning status. I think financial warning status is like 0.7.
Yeah. Yeah, so we did not receive, well, we're already in fine conditions, it's a 2-year fine condition. So we did not receive a warning because of this information, and we're also so So yes, it is a good piece of information. It would be a one time a year report that we would just provide to you.
So I guess if, hopefully, like, I'm thinking, out of this should come a list of look fors to the board that we could. So related to this one, you know, certainly anytime it goes into the financial warning status, we should be a notification that the board should be paying very close attention.
Also look at the 1940. Here, Sweeney, it shows 2.85, 2.65, 1.9. So we dropped a full point between a 3-year period, it wasn't picked up.
Yeah.
You know, so I think just us looking at the score right here, I mean, that would put a lot of, should put a lot of concerns on that point in time. Back, and we're dropping the point, that means that policy is the same. So, I guess what would be helpful would be, what is a healthy score? Is that 2.85? We're gonna kind of, what's a kind of a score that we're aiming for? That looks healthy, on OSB's website. You know, that was the budgets.
I would say it's in the top 2. If I would-
Yeah, and also, I think the other look for, similar to the fund balance, if this number drops significantly, maybe, I don't know, maybe half a point, or 3/4 of a point, something like that, in a year, or whatever point, so whatever those numbers are, that would be kind of look for.
So I took a class, conference on this, and it was convoluted, that's how these calculations add up. Last year. It was birthday points of numbers, it's also learning quickly that when you go to the state, report out to all schools, you're not supposed to compare your schools to schools, it's on campus. And everyone's been used to this last measurement that they've cost in the last couple of years. Although I hear us saying, you know, half point difference, change, all that stuff, when you look at what behind all of that, I'm also hearing that some change our policies, but I hope this organization is never on primary programs, ever on federal funding with my last year. I hope that this organization looks really hard at the unsubstantiated relationship we have with the state legislature. I think you've done a great job, Julie, being very conservative with your voice. I think that may have not been the case in the past. Whatever the case, we have not a bad relationship with them. They have a bad relationship with the budget. It's interesting our budgets. So that's a second lesson, and I don't have organizations have crystal ball. At this moment, unstable is exactly where our country, our state is in context. And I think these stay conservative as possible, strap down. And I'm unhappy we had to go in the right direction, but I'm happy we have strictures that we have. And it means we will do, frankly, what this board has to do by law, coming back to budget, it should be. The unfortunate side of this is that Utah is incredibly volatile. In fact, pieces of our product in order to make this happen. And I think the advice we need, other than how to cut down the loan from OSBI, is how to build up. And I don't know, that just feels like the other side of the ledger that they're not fighting us on. They're just teaching us how to get down to zero. And I think we need to learn some of that, I think we need to just, do it. That by nature is, if one following what they're very expected. I'm concerned that we don't know how to build this school back up. I don't know how to send that message to us yet, but it can't be one side of the ledger. That's sorry for the speech, but when I look at these numbers, that's exactly what.
Its resources you very times. Some of the hopes that we were having in this last budget were passed. They claim it was built on some budget. The increases were very total. We saw a little bit of stock, $35 per student. That will not get as close to what we pay inflation costs for both utilities and insurance. It doesn't. And then, you know, like you had said, the federal government, yes, there, what programs will be cut. It's implemented. So unfortunately, we have to go with stability, because we don't know those things. They have not defined what this was. So I do have to be conservative in these situations as well.
Just one question asked, and that would be your line, but are there innovative activities going on in schools across the state, anywhere in the United States? Another sponsorships. You know, we have concerns about having involved. But stadiums say, you know, Donald's Hampton at the same time. What leverage do you have? What can the board do to work on those opportunities? Wait a minute, say that for grants.
So there's a couple, there are some districts that do have sponsorships. It depends on the board, I know, for example, Seattle for the longest time really struggled with selling or sold sponsorships. But you have a district like Sunbelt that is huge sponsorship, Sunset Shelby Way, it's all over the state. So that's an example. So that's, you know, that's a board decision to determine what to do. I also know that there's opportunities potentially, which is also an issue in a lot of ways, but we talk about Verizon space to the cell phone. You know, that brings in revenue to the district as well, but then you're having conversations about the waves of the so, you know, that's something else that some boards have approved and others have not. So just, it depends on, you know, how people some of those things or those are small revenues. It's not like huge dollar amounts.
Throw in one more, because you remind me that I worked at Cities to work on the system side of the track, real estate, back of it. And they literally, let Seattle City right property, it's happening right now in the city of Florida. There's properties that they use that they lease per month. So it might be like an Albertsons, but after parking lots, leased. They're paying the city of Seattle, city light, you know, property. Not ready to do paradise for a parking lot. At the same time, very interested in areas where it's close to parking lot. Where we have relationships with the city that we might turn that into the park. So that we say full revenues in multiple clear those.
I guess the other thing on that, so we just got a grant, but state to put up solar panels in the building, so that's gonna save utility others. Yeah, we'll see how much that is, but there's others.
Yeah, there's, so we did apply for award to two projects, Showalter and Temple. We had also applied for Dyke and Foster, those two projects. We were supporting two projects, so it's a start, which is what, so that we can potentially save some money. Sure,
And that's particularly good because we know pretty much certain electricity prices are gonna keep going up. And so this is an investment in the long term.
I would have loved to have been afforded all four schools. We did not apply for council, we just to sure, but definitely would like to see all solar panels.
I just want to make sure for the record, Cascade View is just, levy bond to replace the bill.
Yes.
I want to make sure Cascade View is here. I'm not scaring you.
It's just, yes, for the future
Bond measures have been built, as well as the.
it's hard.
They gave you my name, it's
No, I know. There. It's particularly important, you know, since like, we've gotten forward, we're starting to like hear about kind of some of the kind of budget challenges that we're starting to see, even though, you know, near the extent that we did, when she came on, you know, I kept saying, like, how can we go get the money? Like, what's it look to find other ways to stay sane? And I think, you know, in some ways you've done, you know, figuring out, not necessarily one of those other streams, but you've really shared some examples of that. Finding the money to put out the system. I've done a lot of that, so figuring out next things. What are those we want to be extra? Of course, being mindful that we have to balance to going for certain things that are short term, right? Because otherwise they're find ourselves in a very similar place, having to make decisions about what happens to our program once that funding is no longer coming to us. I'm curious about sponsorship that you mentioned with the dealership. Or you said, is that money that like typically a sponsor would give to the district in general use, or is that like coming and saying we want this to support the sports program?
Yeah,
And have my name on it?
right, that's. Research. Some districts have it specifically for general operations, but there's some that probably use it to support their sports.
So we would get to decide that we're the sponsor, and then they just.
I think
that's
it's just.
Unless you decided to create a policy around sponsorship with other parameters around what that looks like. So I think you can do either April.
So the next section, in, board goal 3 was the annual report of certificated staff, administrative staff covered by state versus local. And so, what I did was again provide some examples from a couple of districts on what that looks like. There is a table form that talks about the number of teachers, and so it's not even just, it's all state funding, so it's not just related to the two areas that are important. So this one is just a table format, shows what the state prototypical model for the number of staff units versus what the actual staff units are. This is just the number of staff, it does not show the dollar amounts associated. So as an example, teachers are funded at this next fiscal year a little more than $8,000. And our high-end teachers in this district about it. And so there is already a gap between the number, not only the number of teachers that are funded, but the dollar amounts that are associated. So this just shows the straight number of FTE for this district that provides this information to their report once a year.
So the purpose of this one, I was looking at after attending also presentations on this subject matter is this is advocacy purposes.
Yeah.
So, you know what, because the big dollars are down. I mean, we can talk about sponsorships, come and go. But the big dollars, what we really need to do is get funding based on student need. So this is one of, I think districts are fairly effective this year. Almost every we did the diagrams of underfunding of special ed and SOC, and I'm sure we'll be using that again next year, but those kinds of, graphs and simple things to just keep pounding away at the legislature on, I think, that more effective in the long run. You know, we've got a little special ed this year, so that's what it is. And so, but anyway, that's the purpose of this whole thing, is to try and illustrate to them that, you know, you're way underfunding our staff. So you got to cough that up because we don't have the ability.
Right. And so, you know, again, what the state gives us is an allocation model. It's not for funding purposes. So it's not required by law to fund in the same as they provide funding. So in this example, school office support, this district's prototypical funding is 102. But because of the dollars associated with that, they actually so again, this is a large district on our system through the state. So obviously they have a FTE than we have, but it's a good example as to the reasons why maybe some school office supports FTEs were less than because it is also, even though you don't see it, it's also. The next is just a bar graph. This one just shows kind of similar information, but it's the bar graph. So it talks about tutoring specialists. The yellow is state funded. That's according to the model. The blue is budget, state budget. So that is the district's budget component. And then they also put in their total budget. So even though you have state funded employees, you also have federal programs and other state grants that may have FTE associated with it. So that's why there's that that shows teachers and specialists. And then the next graph, so this first graph is the certificate, and the second graph is the for the classified. So counselors, some of the counselors, instructional assistants, technology staff, security, any family management staff. So it's just two classifications.
On that, they have mentioned as of August next year.
They only provide this once a year. It's a part of their budget process. So that is, so what they're doing is they're comparing information on funding that they're receiving through the budget process to the number of staff they actually.
The concerns are because the prices. On 3 and now.
Yeah. Yes, I would. Yeah, I would assume they're quite a bit of a I know that they made some cuts halfway through the year last year. They were on track to a negative fund balance and biting conditions as well. They actually ended up opening all the legal contracts and renegotiating those mid-year in order to avoid biting conditions. They were on a trajectory that was I think there's some tough bullets at the time. So. And then the last graph is just an example of some annual data showing state versus local funding. This specific graph was just on special education. As we all know, special education is not even close to being fully funded by the state. The gap for special ed funding is significant across every school district in the state of Washington. So this graph is just a representation of the gap. So the total costs, what we receive in state revenue, and then what our reliance is on the And so, you know, we could do something similar to this for other programs as well, but this one is the best. We could also do it for INSOC, we could do it for,
Oh, you have done,
yeah, I've done it, but I do like to do it as well. So it's something that we can provide the, like, the budget process, when we're presenting the budget, or something that I can provide just to show what the requirements are. what the reasons.
yeah, like I said, these kind of grants are really helpful. And we had a nice one last year, especially, so, transportation. Substitute teachers, not what, apps. And it shows it over a number of years, so this is not a money grant, it's just been going on.
Double and still also has some 2023 data. So our learning don't change. If it can be tied in.
Yeah, and again, this is a representation of the graph that I found. Conversation, but so that's basically these graphs were examples of you know, something that we use. So feedback on these last two, it sounds to me like one of those. I would recommend that provide that information to you. I will find out for sure what day exactly the information is posted, and then maybe we'll work as part of the financial package the following month. Again, it's easy to pull. I just don't know if they're consistent on the time. So I want to make sure that maybe if they do it in March, maybe it was a team board meeting, because in that way, if it's late on the
Yeah, as I said about that, these report dates are not cast in concrete because, and it's, I think it's pretty sure, I mean, we've already seen OSBI is starting to get delayed because their budget's gonna be whacked, which means their staff is getting cut, which means it's likely that they're gonna postpone some of these things, so we just need the flexibility. If it makes sense to postpone it, postpone it, but not to get this currently, so.
Yeah, their budget, they were tested. We will as well.
I think it makes sense to add that to the work calendar in May, but then with that caveat, that feeling urgency to chat.
And then feedback on the last part of this, some of the graphs, do you find that this is helpful? Something I should incorporate to either the budget presentation or even year-end reporting. I can do either or.
I think for me, this is kind of
Year-end
stuff,
reporting.
so that, like I say, so we have some ammunition.
So you're thinking, you wanna see it like in Revenue Central? Which helps us advocate. It's also about the process. I don't wanna.
I can't do it. But, yeah, that.
Yeah, I don't think it's any value. Yeah.
Yeah, I would, time that I just.
No, I'm being supportive by saying.
Yeah.
I don't wanna be much, but. Yes, education, and all. And look at this podcast. for new board members. And when they get elected process, it's like. It's up to others, but I feel like might be helpful.
Yeah, so we get this, something similar to this in May, right, as the budget process is middle of. With that.
So the May would be for the projections for the fall. school year. So that's what it would show, for what the following school year would look like. I would probably use that as we're trying to finalize, some of the budget. I guess a little bit too early. And then, we could do it again based on actuals previous year. We do.
So that's. Well,
And I think that could be where we land now, right? And we can always change it. If we're not filling up their records.
how often are we getting the reports now? Budget. Seats. Seats. Speech that you're saying is, I want to make sure. These things we have. Other things that we need to do, we have to get ourselves away from. the problems of this. Right? So I want to make sure that. Getting this year end is good. So we want CPI. And what you're saying about as far as points dropping, but I need to get history of that. So it's obviously, we have that been part of the board. Good. So many checks and balances.
So I guess, are you gonna come back with some recommendations to add to our? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask that I can work on that in the summer after
Okay,
I've done
sure.
the majority of the budget process. The fund balance policy that will be very easy for me to, make those updates. Probably get that at the late 7th for review. But some of the other components, if I can have just a little bit of time to incorporate those.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is just floating in my head since we were talking about members and seats. I agree 100%, right? We have to work with the money that we get based on seats, and that doesn't mean we're not looking at the whole picture, who that young person is. So and what needs that young person has, that we need to support to get support system. So it's funds and seats and who those young people are. So, before Dr. you take this over, so obviously at our last meeting, there's a resolution passed and so we asked that, a presentation get added to our next work, or meeting, which is today, to really, talk about and understand the direction that we are continuing to evolve our multiple services into. So that's what this is intended to do. And then you certainly can ask questions. And I know that when you're here today to speak, but it's this presentation. So anyway, with that.
And so this is about the visioning for the MLO program in this district. Whether we implement it fully this year or next year is up for discussion and collaboration, but this is where I am proposing to close the district move forward in MLL services. And so, that's a strategic plan. So I've attached actually Washington State's, if you can put it up there as a reference, it's Washington State's strategic plan for MLL services. So I just want to highlight that it's attached there. People can look at it, they can access it. And it's all aligned to the efforts that we're doing as well. How do we center universal design for learning? It's not just an initiative. So I just want to be really clear, universal design for learning is not a special education initiative. It is a general education core instruction initiative. That's what it is. And that includes our 504 students, that includes our MPUB students, our McKinney-Vento students, that includes our special education students, and that includes our MLL students as well, our multilingual learners as well. So that is the board adopted, we adopted UDL, Universal Design for Learning, as our instructional framework for the work. And we've also adopted the MTSS systems and all of those components. We also adopted street data as our assessment framework, talking about high-level data, street data, and I do believe that it's important that we also listen to the voices as well. I also have to look at data. So I have to look at data, and I look at long-term data and short-term data. And the board asked me when I was hired, because I am considered a state expert in bilingual education and multilingual services in the state of Washington. They asked me to do an analysis of our TVIP program. That was one of the asks that I had. So I did that analysis. And what I'm stating to everyone in the room and online is that our goal is to align our service model. And I don't know how many years it's going to take, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But we need to do more work in terms of building up our general education teachers and our core instruction. And sort of multilingualism is what we should be aspiring to as a superpower. That means we have more staff that look like our students, that speak languages of our students, and that we actually make sure that all of our staff, that every teacher in our system is a language teacher. Our PE teacher is a language teacher. Our art teacher is a language teacher, right? So what does that mean, and how do we build that capacity? It doesn't mean everyone gets a certificate, but it does mean everyone embraces language as a through line to everything we do in the system. So I just wanted to state that. So if you could pull up the presentation, that would be. And then you can just move ahead. I just want to make sure they're thinking. And then move it to page. I would just want to move it to that page right there. That multilingualism is our superpower. It's aligned to our anti-racist goals in terms of leadership development, in terms of what that means. And I will say it also means that we need to be, and I talked to human resources a lot about this, about prioritizing multilingual learners in our high school. That means for our principals, our assistant principals, our office staff, and that we need to start moving in that direction. So I believe it is first. I know it's equal then. So I think it's really important that we all think it through, because we need to start looking at language as an asset and really start building, and that we actually should be the model for the state as being one of the most highly diverse districts in the state and in the nation. We should be the model of multilingualism in the system. Next slide.
Also because it's 50% of students.
It's 50% of our students, actually 50% of our students only identified by assessments. It's probably 80% overall who are bilingual, so multilingual. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about federal funding and TVIP funding, just for a little bit in terms of some of the pieces. Not now, but I do have a little sheet for the board, and actually here's one for you. So it just explains some of the differences and nuances between TVIP. We receive funding through 2 mechanisms. So one is TVIP, Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program, and the other, and that's our state funding system, and the other is our Title III dollars. And so, and I think it's important that all of us really look at that funding system. Once this, I had to have Amy review this just to make sure I didn't have anything incorrect. And I will also attach this handout on the board docs. But it's just to sort of clarify some of the differences. When I'm not gonna go over the federal funding and the title funding, but one of the important pieces that's there is, and the state is also requiring us to, it's not to use our funding to supplant instruction, but to enhance and provide services for instruction.
Just a question just about funding, it's probably more for Amy. Is Title III funding that we are concerned about losing? Or
So, we are concerned that it might be cut, but not eliminated. So, OSPI is still going to will wait for the states, that will determine how much. So, Title III, it's Title II and Title IV, two funding sources that.
Although having said that, the federal government has already announced investigations of OSPI.
Yeah.
And so I would say, given the uncertainty and so much better see, I would count.
And which I think is important context,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Even though you're not gonna talk much about those streams, important to know what that's getting.
Well, one thing the state has said to us, and I'm part of now the superintendent's advisory group. One of the things that the superintendent has said to us over and over again is that the state and OSPI is not in a position to, so any federal funding is cut, but they're not in a position to give the funding to cover. So we actually have to give it for that. So we're trying to think that through a little bit, and I'll also, there just was a national thing that called out that there's some investigations, cities that are sanctuary. Please take one of them. Our sanctuary. We don't call ourselves sanctuary, we don't call it something else, but there's going to be a focus on that. So I just want to say that that is a big concern for us, and so we're trying to think about how we're going to be maximizing the funding. And one of the things that I want to share is I've been part of the conversations to really support the changes. And I actually did not have any knowledge about funding or how the MLO program really was happening since I left in 2014. But I wanted to make sure that we are in line with vision and making sure that we're getting this support, which is actually. So I'll move to the next slide, please, which is MLO strategic plan. That next slide along nope, page 8. Go up. Yep. Nope, page 8. Nope. Yes, thank you. So these are the landmark court cases that actually dictate the rights of our students. There's Lau versus Nichols. That's actually a really interesting case. You read about it. It's from out of San Francisco, where the family sued because the students weren't getting access to core instruction. And so, and then we have Castaneda versus Picard. So I think people can read on them on their own, but I think the most important part is making sure that we're providing language development program, making sure that it's an educational theory and high quality research findings. And actually both documents that I have actually have a lot of research embedded in that we're staffed and resourced, and that we evaluate the effectiveness of services provided and adjust the programs to ensure students receive language proficiency and academic success. So it's the balance of making sure that our students are getting the services they need in an MLO program, but also making sure that they're getting access to all of the core instruction, all the general education curriculum, and all of those things, which is what families and students have been asking for a long time, and in TEQUOLA as well. Next one. This is the state's requirements for civil rights obligations for us to make sure that we are following this test and that we have an identification process in place, which we do. Language development services with qualified staff, including ELs who also qualify for special education, meaningful access to content without unnecessary segregation, program about, and this is actually out of OSPI, this is not this is language systems, language, program evaluation and language access. And I would say that's also what we need. Next slide. And then the strategic plan, what it calls out is implementing inclusionary practices for multilingual learners, which is goal 5. So increasing collaboration, co-planning, and co-teaching of ELD specialists and content teachers, building the capacity of educators to use strategies such as sheltered instruction, lab, and universal design for learning. And those are all things we are doing. So this is not to say we're not doing that, and I think it's also important to say we're not doing the top part either. We are doing this. What I'm trying to do is let's do a place where we're doing it in all of our buildings, consistency, and then developing the understanding of administrators to support meaningful inclusion. That's what that's as well.
Can you just clarify the term co-teaching?
Co-teaching means that an ELD teacher is actually just like it says here, co-planning, collaborating, and co-teaching. So that could mean that they are actually together side by side in the classroom. And so that has a larger number of MLM students in the classroom, and they're working together. And so some models, actually, there's a lot of acceptable models of co-teaching around the state, not just in general education, but in special education. And so that is a model we're moving towards. It's challenging because we don't have all the staffing, but I think ensuring that we're clustering our students with their general education teachers together in a co-teaching way. So that way there can be pull out, there can be co-design, there could be co-teaching in terms of you have 2 teachers in a classroom supporting the majority of the needs of the students in the classroom. All right. And then just 6 stages of language acquisition that we identified through READA. Thank you. And then so you can stay. Oh, so 12. Thank you. Yes, you can go there. And then this is so the slide's not great. I just try to make it as big as I can. But this is what OSPI has published as our data related to the READA assessment before. I'm just make sure I have things in front of me. Before it was a different assessment that the state used. Actually, when I was part of the budget committee, we actually made the recommendation that we do READA assessment. And as you can see from the scores, when we were on the former assessment, we actually started a downward trajectory in terms of progression that we have pretty flat. But I also want to acknowledge we have had a high number of newcomers coming in. We've had a high number of families coming in, and we're actually now experiencing a large number of families as well.
Quick question, are these first steps considered low?
They're considered low. The research has shown, and I would say, when I was the principal at Seattle Grove School, which is mostly, it was 90%, 8% newcomer school, but it was accredited high school for newcomers. The research shows that newcomers actually have high growth in the first 2 years. So they're looking high growth, and then you can see more of a plateau happening over time. And so that's what we're wondering what the model changes to ensure that students are aligned to research potential. Because they're eager to learn, they come in, they're ready to go, and we want to make sure that our students are eager.
So in 2 to 4 years, would you want to put something back? Percent, or would you like to 10%?
Well, I think it's relative, because I will say, I'm going to add COVID has done a number on our students. That's one. And then, I'm sorry, if our students are living in tents with water for people around, I'm just going to say, so we have to think about all of it. I'm not going to say I predict that we should have like this magical number. We have to look at the context of what we have. But our students also, they've experienced trauma in their home country. They're experiencing trauma here. So we have to be reasonable, and we have to look year to year what's reasonable. So I don't want to say that that I want to make a predictor, because we get so many different students with different situations. And I will be honest, when we received a lot of Portuguese students, right, we didn't have the capacity or the budget to hire a bunch of Portuguese speaking support. We just didn't have that. That actually is a detriment for students. Our students need more adults around them that actually can support their language development in their language. That is the best practice. Actually, that's the #1 growth, is when you have L1 speakers receiving some support from L1 staff. that can do that. So, but we're not there yet. We're just,
Well, I think kind of on that same note, I wonder if like pairing this indicator with how long people that are in our system for 5-6 years stay within the program. That's if they were closer. Many of our students are in 5-6 years, right? And the goal is to move them out of the model for 4.
Yeah, but- and I also wanna address, like, so what I'm trying to fix is what are the systemic fixes that we have in doing that? So one of the changes we made last year in the secondary program, so it's middle and high school, is removing, and I'm gonna use the word, because the state uses the word, but unnecessary, non-credited courses for our students. So a lot of our students in courses, in non-credited courses, and these were long-term ELD students. And so we, through our work with the principals at both the middle and the high school and the programming, they have moved most of the students. Now our newcomers still get ELD support, but they're moving more towards 4. So that actually got minimized. So that was a systemic fix that actually probably led, that was probably one of the, some long-term, in the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna ask. And I'm digging through it, so 90%. We want, like the stock market, over the years it goes radically up and down, but what we want a trend that is up.
Yeah.
So I think you're at least willing to commit to something like that.
Yes, for sure.
And then the question is, how steep is that trend, not reduction down in the year, yourself population? Asylum seekers who are just sitting.
I think, what I think we should be doing is not compare, we're unique, but there are other districts as unique as the nation. So I don't think we should be comparing ourselves to the MLO program in Seattle or the
Yeah.
that has 5 dual language programs, et cetera, et cetera. I think we should be looking at districts like Yakima, like other places that actually have high poverty, high transition, have trauma, have ice in their backyard, all of those things. So I think we should be doing more of that work and working together with other districts and national too, to really look at those metrics and what is a reasonable trajectory. Yes, so I don't think we should be comparing ourselves to any of that, because we are an exemplar in the state. What I'm saying is, we have work to do, but we also have to acknowledge where we are. Both and, it's not an either or, it's a yes and. All right, next slide. And this is just really simple graph of all the languages that we have, the majority of the languages, not all, but the majority of the languages we have here in the district. So you can see our biggest pie is Spanish speakers, which is close to 40% of all of our languages in our district. And then, you know, English, Portuguese, on and on. So, and so our top 7 languages is from our Vietnamese to Spanish, Somali, Dari, Portuguese. Portuguese is now a significant number, and we have to do some work in thinking about hiring Portuguese speakers as well as more Somali speakers. I just had a great meeting with Voices for Tomorrow, who does this that dual language program that's going back. Love to chat about maybe visioning what could dual language look like, future dual language programs. All right, next slide. This is just WIDA. WIDA is the state. This is this year's WIDA. Over the last 3 years, kind of WIDA, just with graph broken down. So you can look and see high growth. And this is the pass rate. Growth rate, sorry, pass rate. And then next slide is, okay, move to the next slide, then we talk about. And this is progression, how they're progressing on the state, which is a higher percentage threshold, so that's good. Because our goal is to focus on growth, but we want to see all our schools going.
So, yeah, I was on the last one on Cascade was trying to not put right in that situations there and now kind of they all kind of went upward on the second chart. 2023, and they're all going down.
Well, I think, you know,
We will take another.
we have a large number of students, we have students that come all the time. I mean, it's just all honesty, our elements right now. And so, so we have to talk about that. I think when we look at our enrollment program, there's, you know, students have been here short term, we have to start looking at data. It's, I'm interested in some of our long-term students, how long do they stay in them, because, so much has been flux sometimes, and the group that experiences the most flux. And then moving to the shifts in ELO programming, just shift slide 16. And these are things we're already starting to do. So I just want to acknowledge and really thank the staff and the principals for really working through some of these things. We had several GLAD, we just hosted our GLAD training. So that work is underway to really help build the capacity of our general education staff into understanding some strategies, but of course the shifts, and this also comes out of in collaboration with OSPI, the Common Core Standards, of course, English Language Proficiency Standards. We have those. I know those were the drivers for our MLL team, require MLL access to core content classes. All teachers are language teachers. ELPs benefit other language learners, and then shift from technical focus to academic, and then making sure we raise the level of vocabulary development in our core instruction and add high complex language. Next slide. And then just shifts that are needed to happen and support guidance from instructional leaders who understand the important shifts for HTLL. And then time to analyze the language standards and CCS standards in appropriate grade level, and then coaching and support for co-teaching, push-in interventions, and language sampling. The push-in interventions is something we continue to strive towards. I think we have various levels of implementation, but we also recognize that some of our newcomer and our L1 students need a different level of support sometimes because they are still working on building these skills. And then the next slide. So this is last year's slide that we are presenting, and it's just a key component of data. And this is so if you look at what's in green, those are the total number of students that we had last year. We have less this year, but this is the total number from last year. And so what I was looking at, years in MLL program. The goal is 5 to 6 years, so that's why I used 5 to 6 years as the mark in the middle. In the left-hand side, you'll see all the students, so it's done by grade levels, number of students is on the bottom, years in MLL programming on the top, and then green indicates less than 5 years in MLL program services. The yellow is 5 or 6 years, and then 7 or more years in red. So you have all, that's a large number of students in the red. And many of those students actually came up through our system. And so those are students that we are really monitoring, and we're working really closely with our middle school and high school folks. I am the supervisor to the middle school and high school principals. And so those are conversations we have all the time to talk through what are we doing. And they're the ones that have adopted more of the co-teaching model to work for that. And they've actually really analyzed their programming and non-accredited courses that they were offering students. And so they've done a lot of work over the last 2 years, but we have to do this. We have to make sure that our elementary, as they're moving into that new way of programming in the middle of high school, that our students are really willing to enter and hope exit sooner. It's not just a middle school, high school, it's a pre-K-12 process that we're trying to look at and analyze things. So how do we deepen our work in elementary so that they're more successful, because they're going to be in core instruction, and they're going to be in those classes, and then how do we do that and make sure that in high school that they can get the high school credits they need to graduate. And because we're trying to, because that's the conversation I've been having with Highline College, is because a lot of our students who go into Highline College were taking non-accredited courses, you know what I mean? They were not getting the credit for their courses when they were exiting our district. So I had a conversation with Highline College. So what are you going to do to make sure that our students are actually getting credited for those courses when they're coming in? But that means we have to strengthen our program as well, so that when our students go into the Highline College, because What I don't want to do is have our students go in and say they sign up for Tukwila Promise, we're paying for 90 credits, and about half of them or even a quarter of them don't spend. So I'm looking at a PK planning system for our kids, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm having conversations in Highline College, and that we're making sure that we're aligned in all of our pieces, and that we're doing the fidelity, and so that we're mirroring what our goals are in all of our systems. So that it's a PK 20 thing we're looking at, and I'm trying to make sure that our students are getting the credits that they deserve for the instruction and language and content that they are investing their time.
I think it's important to point out, I saw this in the computer scripts, but it's much harder to exit develop status the higher in the grade you go. So in one of those graphs you showed, the percent progressing, and this is well known. This is throughout the state, and it has to do with the tests and so forth. So, you know, we want them to get out of LL status. You know, like it's much easier to do that then. Once they get into the higher grade, it's
Very hard, very challenging. And I will just say the other work we have to do is making sure in special education, they also, if I say every teacher is a language teacher, that's also in special education as well. Because we might have some undiagnosed disabilities, right, that are being masked by language development. And so the more we can actually work with our students, especially if they're here 5 years, 5 to 6 years in our system, through our system, then the more we can actually move our students so they can actually get the service. And actually, many students are both, they're bilingual and they have special needs. So
I might be the only one who lay behind on confidence chart and see how many years. I can see declining number of, like, see just about any both. I think two-year, maybe 7. Is the goal to have them done by 7 years? Why is it that 7 plus?
yeah, it actually, that is cool. So if you look at Prash's theory of language development, it takes 3 to 5 years to develop basic language. You know, that's the, you know, the basic understanding, which is really perfect.
Sure.
But it takes 5 to 7 years to develop academic content language. And that means that's the language getting ready for high school and college.
So that moves, does that move more?
But well, actually writing, reading, speaking, all of that starts in that period of 5. That's when we're talking, it's not just language proficiency. That's when I talk about the leveling. So it's about Prash's theory, and this is research based on every language learner in the world, whether you're learning English or Swedish or Spanish. The language, the L1 language development and L2 that's pretty standard. It's not saying there's not outliers. There's people who learn language really quickly, and there's people who take longer. So of course there's outliers, and we expect outliers this class. But what I'm saying is that what I'm trying, this is not a career program. This is just 1 year, 2023-24 snapshot of all our students last year. And what I'm saying is, with so many students in 7 to 6 years, and remember, actually, state law allows our MLL learners, just like special ed students, to stay till they're 21. So that's by the longer year trajectory. So just reminding them, by 15 years, that's fine. But the longer they stay in our programming, some of our students, and that's a large number. If you look at all of our, that's a large number. We need to figure out how we do a better job in our long-term analysis with our long-term.
So
That number should be low.
yeah, so when you say do better, you need to keep it to the 5%.
Well, as much as we can, and then we have the typical outliers, right? So what I'm saying is, and this was stated last year, that we want to guarantee that we don't want to make MLL a lifelong thing. Our goal is to support our students with the content skills, the language skills, so they can do well, they can do well, all the things that they need to do to have their college career.
And I did 5 years of training.
I'm just okay.
And by the way, this chart has been
All right, and then just, next slide, just that we have to work on, we have to work on, when we keep our long-term LLs, that's in the middle school, direct result of language instruction they received or didn't receive, right, or maybe even the conditions. Ensure robust oral language development, LLD strategies, monitor language development, and then making sure that we have common and serious challenge across the state, that this is a state level problem. I believe personally that we have so many MLL students, so many migrant students in our system. It would be nice if the PESB board would actually, and our education system and our universities actually require language development or MLL in our general education certification programs. I believe we should. We just have so many students. We're one of the top in the nation with our migrant and special education, our MLL population.
So as these is.
Oh, professional education board, yeah, sorry, but I think I had some kind of work with them about 3 years ago about that, so that was something that they were looking at, is developing an inclusionary certificate, but that is something we need to do. And it requires specialized language instruction, students at serious risks of dropout or lack of success, and additional support class paired with content specialists, academic English courses, and also requires common focus across all content areas. All right, next slide. And just this is already talked about this. These are what we're striving toward, and we're already doing it. We've done some lab training. We're doing the CCS, PLC, coaching, scheduling, all of this. The schools are already starting to do this. And then this is the outline of the program models for the state. Our goal is to have working language programming in all of our elementary schools. I would like to see Thorndike and Tukwila L eventually, not now, we don't have money, but I would love to see them eventually in the next 3 to 5 years. We start at least one more dual language program in one of those elementary schools and start another dual language program within that time frame. But that means we have to keep recruiting them, but we have to wait until we get to that place. And then I'd also like to see our heritage language courses really develop. I spent some time with Mr. Christopher looking at the data math and our heritage language algebra class. Oh my gosh, it was like incredible what the students were able to do and the growth they were able to do in those classes. So it's definitely, we have some promising practices happening with our heritage language. We have data to show that it's working. It's just going to take us some time.
Be the instruction done in the language that the students that's, I think when I kept talking about how, like, why are we not testing? Why are we not doing these things? Because language is actually a sense of like the brilliance that young people have, right? Versus being so stuck up. Anyway, I just didn't prove that.
And sure is data.
It's going on another,
Yeah.
student session, values.
That was something that we were talking with actually with Zamzam from Voices for Tomorrow, is maybe considering Arabic language component, because so many of our families that with whatever languages they speak is comprised, but all of them want to learn for their religious and cultural reasons. So we talked about that as a potential, another Spanish. There's so many potentials, and I'm excited to think about the future of that. All right, and then also just looking at we're looking at all these models, but our goal is to move towards more L1 development, L2 development, making sure that L1 is being really honored in our instruction, which does mean that does affect gains in some areas. And then I just want to highlight this piece. There's a huge document. I didn't publish it or give it to anybody. It's over 100 pages, but it's the Washington State MLL policy and practice guide. This is page 67, and I'll just want to say that this is what their goal is, that, and I found this, I just want to make sure, and I'm not saying that we don't have paraprofessionals, that's not what I'm saying, and that we don't have aides, we don't have tutors, we still need and must have them. We have too many students to serve. I was a bilingual para educator in the migrant education program way back in the day. My mom was one for 25 years. They are vital to the program. So I want to state that for the record. I know firsthand, I have firsthand experience. But what the model is eventually is that they wanna actually have the paraprofessional aides and tutors may not take the place of qualified teachers and maybe used as an interim measure while the school district hires, trains, and otherwise secures enough qualified staff to serve its multilingual learners. If a school district uses paraprofessionals, and I wanna say, I adore all of the paraprofessionals for attending lab trainings, all of that, and they're trying to do that work to make sure they have the understanding to support. But we must provide language assistance services to multilingual learners that supplement those provided by qualified teachers. And that's something we don't have. And so that's something we have to move towards, is making sure that we have more, we talk about belonging all the time. We talk about students feeling belonging, and I do believe that that helps. But when we can't rely on technology to do that work, that technology we talk about, we're actually talking about a policy on cell phones. So why would we put devices in front of kids, right? So we have to think about the human factor of that. And students need people who speak their language in our buildings. And I don't know what that's gonna take. I don't know what that conversation is gonna look like, but I wanna state that that is something we must get to. I don't know if it's gonna take us 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but that is a goal we need to have, that we need to have the languages with our liaisons, with our teachers, and with our staff. And I think that is where we need to head towards, because if we're talking about belonging and inclusion and our anti-racist policy, our equity policies, then we're actually, then we're not doing it right now. Those are the things that we're trying to do.
Good question, when you say devices, pockets on.
I'm talking about anything, Google Translate, just everything. And all of the things are not needed, because we have too many languages, but we do have information that says what are our primary languages we're serving, and so I'm saying and this is something, this is actually, this is copy and paste from the Washington State and the policy
I'll
practice.
just try to talk again.
Yeah.
I think we all would agree if you use proficient in 2 languages, far better teacher.
Not a better teacher.
Or a far-
Replace the school, right? It's better than it's school.
We have so many amazing teachers, so many amazing
Let's say one, let's say it right, the point is, tool is not equitable to somebody who's so language or more children. We're trying to get up to speed and at a different time.
I'm saying we need to do a more intentional job of hiring bilingual, multilingual staff. And especially in our MLL program, as designed by what the state is sharing its best practices based on research. And the other research that said is that actually more research says that certified MLL teachers is the best instructional practice to serve our students in MLL. And there's a lot of research that Professor Kenji, who actually works very closely with our State Department. There's a lot of research. I have it. I can send it to folks if you want to read it. But the model should be that we try to have more MLO certified teachers and more language specific staff to support our students at the
Okay, so that means the trend and strategy and best practices that go that direction. We also see when we can't get some qualified place, the backfill is everything else. Okay, then you prove that, so it's a digital stage.
For sure.
Okay.
And then I will add, I'm just the last slide here. And so this is part of the work that Karen and I are striving to do. It's just following the TDA, it's getting part of language, all our budget decisions. So we're gonna look at that, analyze that, look at our current numbers. We're gonna do all of that work. Has communicated timelines that we're committed to finding positions for any staff member that is eligible and impacted by staffing and programmatic changes. TSD will center our strategic plan in compliance with federal and state funding. And we just reminder we are in year 2 of finding positions. Hopefully we'll not be but we are and that's all I have. So questions.
But I just want to kind of, I think, go back to that, just maybe restate that one, reframe, I guess. I guess in my perspective, I see like, this iPad, right? It's a great tool, right? There's a lot of really amazing translation supports in this device, right? So I can scan a document and it can translate the document for me. And there's like a tool that you can have a conversation, right? Translates at one time. And that is a great tool that can support. But it doesn't replace, if I'm a teacher and I'm a monolinguist, right? So I wish that I wasn't, right? I wish I spoke 4 languages. It's going to be more effective, right? If I can speak Spanish and come to you and have that conversation versus having a conversation. Right. I know, I think I was trying to restate, right, in a way that said it's not anything about an educator quality of instruction. It's about the human connection and going back to again, the belonging in the way that must help increase probably a lot of things with that young person, their sense of comfort, their sense of safety, that sense of belonging and connection coming from that human rather than like that was so I just again wanted to say out loud, right, again, that it's not a quality of instruction, but the connection. Yeah.
And I just also wanna, I'll be honest, the team has done a lot of work in supporting the development and the lab trainings and all of the things, and there's work that's happening in both levels. So we have staff that are highly trained, and so that is without a question, right? But we have to figure out how are we maximizing our TVIP funds and Title III funds. How are we ensuring alignment to the vision? And it's not just the state's vision, it's the holistic vision around, universal design, making sure students are getting core instruction as much as they can. And I'll be honest, I was a newcomer teacher. I was a newcomer teacher for 5 years. And, when I was a newcomer teacher, I'm gonna let you know, I believed they had to stay with me the whole time. I was in a unique situation. I got to build the newcomer program. It was at Berkeley Marshall Elementary School, and I had the 4th and 5th graders. And I had 28 kids one time, all newcomers, and I had about, 30 languages, felt like, but I think it was 18 at the time. And I believe I was a first-year teacher, and so I will say at that time, trying to channel young Miss Concy Pedroza, I felt like the students needed to be with me the whole time. I was afraid to let them go out into general education. When I did those, I was only allowed to keep my students for 1 semester. I had them full-time for 1 semester, and I didn't want to do it. And I actually got letters every year telling me, Concy, you need to educate your students. And I fought hard, even for the whole year. One, because I didn't want them to have an interrupted transition because they were going to other schools. And 2, I just felt that students needed longer. What I decided to do is after 5 years of doing that, then I went to general education. And I went to Florida Latona, they had a Spanish influence, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna take what I know. And I learned that, and I would happen to be with a lot of teachers who actually embraced their MLL students, and they really focused on language development core. And then they actually utilized me to help them design and co-design and all of these things. And I learned, right, through my own personal experience, that our students need those role models around them all the time. But they also need time to practice in a safe manner. So I learned something. I had one experience. I only worked in my programming, for a long time. And then I went for in general education. And it was important that I have that experience. They utilized my expertise, but I also was able to see really the beauty that can happen and seeing students just go whew, and grow in meaningful ways. And so I think and that's how we designed the model for Seattle World School specifically. And one of the models we designed, just to share with everyone here, I was asked to develop Seattle World School, which is available in Refugee High School, and credited. The only way you could do it is to make sure every teacher, the algebra teacher, the PE teacher, and the music teacher, and the algebra and the biology teachers also had ELL endorsements. 95% of the staff there still have endorsements. and all of the language support needs, all of their teachers, language at the top, just to serve the students. So I got to design that school in that frame, and they graduated the first class in the first year. So it can be done. What I'm trying to think through now is how do we do this with the bargaining language we have? How do we do this to support? And also, I also understand people don't want to leave their schools, and I hear you. I just met with the Burn 19 yesterday. I had a long meeting with them, and the two teachers that came at the previous board meeting yesterday. So I hear that language, and so I'm trying to figure out the best way forward. What I'm here to say though is this is going to be the model. Whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, I don't know. But I just want to let you know that I hear you, and I'm trying to take that all in and really think through the best decisions to moving forward. And I just want to state that out loud in this space.
Just want to make a couple of comments in line with growth. Obviously, I'm a big fan of growth metrics, and there's a couple other growths we looked at. Talk about the you can also look at growth metrics on standard state tests, test back tests for both reading and math. And if you look at how the ELL students are doing that, we're below the kind of state average growth. So I'm not talking about efficiency, growth year over year. And so we've been consistently below the state average. And the other thing that I like to look at is there's a school, it's a public charter school, South Seattle, Rainier Prep. They've been doing this co-teaching model for years, a full co-teaching model, and their growth numbers, and they have similar demographic starts in percentage. Their growth numbers are way above the state. So, this, it's not necessarily an easy transition, but it's a transition that works. So, just wanted to add that.
Any other questions from the board? Yes, please. Seven. Eight. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate, right, that this is the vision for where we're going, right? And I think there not just the research, right, that has already been shared, the data that's already been shared, but when we again think about like really honoring and recognizing the dignity of the humans that are in your system, this is about humans. Right? And also recognizing that like systemic change is really hard. And it both takes time, and at the same time, these are things that our system should have done years and years and years ago. And so what I'm inviting us to do as a system is think about how we can really be focused on the changes that need to happen, knowing that it takes time, but also moving with a swiftness because our students deserved it yesterday. And I think one of the things that would be helpful for me and likely to other folks is okay, now we've got a vision, it's a plan. Right? Because of course there are so many things and hopefully layers to the plan, right? I think a little bit about co-teaching. I know that from what I understand, we've dabbled with co-teaching, and folks have felt that it was just harder, right? More time consuming and all these things wasn't effective. And we also know that there are effective models of co-teaching, and when effective models are done, it benefits students, right? So the work might be, how do we design a co-teaching model using information we have from other districts, perhaps other schools that are doing it well, but find that something, a model that is going to work for us, right? But that requires all of us to lean in, right? And say, okay, we're committed to doing this. Let's figure out what that looks like. So I love to right, we have to make sure that we move these changes to say we're moving to co-teaching model. We have the investment in our staff to say this is how we are bringing you along, how we're designing this co-teaching model, and we're going to make sure that you feel as quick as possible, knowing that we can't ever be 100% equipped for any situation that we walk into. But we're going to equip you as much as possible to have the tools that you need and understand your role in the strategic business, right? So I think what would be helpful is, now that we've got this vision, what is, and it, you know, it doesn't have to be fully baked out, right? But here's like some phases of our approach to getting us from where we are right now to where we want to be in 8 years. And what the community input, where our community, where opportunities are for community input, how the MLO committee is going to be a part of all of that decision making. So I think that would be really helpful. How are these decisions going to be made when, and again, kind of high level is fine for now, because I know a lot of that needs to be done with the learning. I think that would be helpful now that we see the vision and hope that we want to do what's best for our students. And this feels to me like the way.
I want to ask you any questions.
I think the only thing that, because I'm kind of taking, and I know we've had talks about that people are living, and that the looks of that, because that, I think that has to be tough. You know what I mean? I understand, I can feel trying to change. In this change, we have, there's damage, right? So I want to make sure that the district, like we talked about, for record, that we're finding that there's positions that's going to may not be the same, right? But that they're working with HR compliance here, and if they're able to fit into the program that you have, so I'm reading through a very nice letter that was emailed, also printed out here. If there's qualified people that can step into those roles, they're already in education, step into that. So I just want to be sure I agree with the vision. Sure that currently recognize that people that are leading, we're talking years, 27 years. There are other ones that are thinking, but not. That's super scary. So I want to be sure that, you know, we're very careful.
And it doesn't mean that we go straight to that model. We have to, also look at our current numbers and review it very carefully. And I just want to reiterate, we have to put in place goals. Actually, it probably won't be 7 because we have to talk through that. But I think we have to get there eventually, moving towards MLO, and that will require us. All right, and I did pass to you that our members here the letter to be sent. All right. There's no more questions. All right. Item.
CFO, so I am bringing forward today 2 policies for review. These are new policies, as part of WASDA. The first one is policy 6217, titled electronic funds transfer. Otherwise also known as on house. So it's basically employees on deposits. This one is coming up. Again, because it's recommended by WASDA, but also the auditor's office arguing us and have already. So this one seemed like a pretty easy policy to bring forth. I am adopting the WASDA language. For the record, we have been doing ACH so I think this policy is pretty straightforward. Question on that.
Looks like that, well, 19 or, so lots of acronyms down here, one to flash, and I look each 5 organizations. So, yes, that's what it is being part of the street. But they secures and know that there's a liability between the organization and these. Sure that those standards. I think so. This is. Which means we're just talking about. If we just have stand set up, we do electronic funds activity already, paycheck about this, or if this is a new reporting, something new, we just start having policy.
So no, this is existing and we never had the policies. The policy came into effect several years ago, was recommended by laws, so just because of the amount of fraud that's in the industry nationwide. It has impacted a couple of school districts, in the surrounding areas. But it obviously is a huge issue. So it's just making sure that we have a policy. In practice, we have procedures in place, we have been operating with electronic transfer speech for members. That's how we create employees, it's actually employee like the exception. That's the students that teach women. And then we do pay our vendors because it's a village. With a number of processes in place to make sure.
Okay, and often what the case is, the stage. So that may be the top. I want to go on record saying, Mark, this guy is this.
Yeah, my understanding is PCI is compliance to the transactions.
It is, but it also has to be.
Yes.
Data.
Yes.
That's all I have on that, and then, the leases and S, DXDA, is that also something that's in place, we just,
So 6560, so WASD has recommended policy number 6550. I updated it, so we already have 6550. So this is it's fairly recent. There were two standards that were implemented by the they are very similar in nature on how you would work. One is your subscription based technology, and the other is on your pieces. So a good example is these are postage reader machine that would qualify. And so things like that. This district did not implement the year that was required. So last year, as I was closing the books, I implemented this standards for both. But now I'm following through with the policy that is on. So we do have a procedure, we have procedures in place, how we calculate what this looks like. So this just formalizes this policy. This is also something that will be looked at by the state auditor's office to see if we have a policy.
How was the $5,000 by that?
So it's basically looking at the size of our district and reasonableness. The definition is, it has to be something that's not so substantial. So a little backtrack. When this first came into play, the district tried to say a capitalization question was $2,000. With a district of our size, the auditors came back and said, "Oh, that's way too high." I will tell you, at Seattle, $1 billion budget, their capitalization threshold is $100,000. So that was reasonable, 50,000 for Technola in the size, not reasonable. So I used the standard federal capitalization threshold. I figured that was too much size. I think that's a lot of districts' perspectives.
All right, so we've got two items up for action. First is approval of resolution 962, approval of contract for Shell as locker room.
Second,
I have some questions.
yeah,
My first question is, what are the improvements gonna involve?
So basically, it's the foster. And so basically, it's doing upgrades to that area, basically the lockers in that area. And so it's kind of what both projects are. It's kind of been on the schedule now for a couple of years. It's something to
So replacing the lockers and other improvements, what are some of those other?
I would talk.
So why I'm asking, is, we have an obligation to state law and our policy of gender schools to ensure that we have spaces in locker rooms that, gender expansive students and trans students feel safe. And anytime, I was really disappointed coming onto the board shortly after Foster was built, recognizing that we didn't have the conversation internally about how we could create spaces, gender neutral restrooms in a school as they were being updated. And so this feels like maybe there's an opportunity to say, what does design mean? We're gonna make improvements on this anyway. What does it look like to actually make sure that we look at the design of our locker rooms to ensure that there are spaces again for non-binary, gender expansive and trans students to change, feel safe in those spaces. That isn't just a room by themselves, right? Again, you think about inclusion and belonging, that's a part of it. And I know that there's a lot to consider there. And at the same time, it's not that hard, right? And lots of other places are doing it. So I am resistant to actually approve this until I know that that's been thought about. And there's a plan to ensure that improvements made are in the best interest of our gender students.
so. For me, this is kind of lacking some context. So I assume this is money that's going to come from this fund, and presumably the source of that is the so the question, for me on all these projects like this is, okay, so what is our current list of projects? And you said this has been on the list for a while, but it's for me to really understand the context of this. What do we have on this currently? Rough estimates, how much it costs, and so then why did these two, for example, top and bottom, what I talked about. So I just need some context here. So I know.
I don't have that list. And so I will have to get that for you. So, I don't, not to put pressure, so I do. This is a project that we will have to do. That's why I was. So I do apologize for that. The lead time to get the lockers is bumping up against substantial. So, in saying that, based on the information that you guys were requesting, it sounds like I'm going to have to do this project. Just.
Can you give us this one? Today, or is there like?
Yeah, no, it would have to be accepted today, or because we were told that it didn't for the launch. So, so I don't want to put pressure to say we're asked to do this. I think it's.
The line is there, set up, side. And it's not those that are using. So we could take time to do it. I wonder if there's a way to resolve this with pass with a proviso or pending. Have a review done by probably parties. As to what the design is, it sounds like the reactor case. What was there or stuff that's not those things been destroyed. But if it's not that case, and if it's in revisions made that could be corrected, so if for a contract that would be a smart thing to do, and then we have a win-win. But if we don't get that done, then yeah, here's the process.
Even if we feel like blockers, they get this issue. So we use them, so.
I haven't had a tremendous expression.
But makes it's a lot. They're, you know, they're gross, they're kind of, you know, they're outdated. You know, they are. But I'm assuming, you know, they still are safe, hopefully. I haven't been in there in a while. Well, I don't know the state.
And I guess, so, you know, knowing that they're maintained what locker is locker and dingy, you know, when you think about what your priorities, would you say, hey, we really want better locker rooms or dingy, or we want to make sure our locker rooms are and student activities, they should.
Yeah, I get sure. That's so, but you know, fellow speaker, the locker. You know, I don't think locker rooms are very safe place, even for the LGBT community. They as and having to change in front of people, or things happen. And you know, it's a place where, you know, if you have stories like if you have your male PE teacher, he can't really enter, you know, female locker room and then things happen. You know, it's just a, you know, one person against another and things happen behind closed doors and people get hurt.
So it would help if you knew what the scope of work is. The scope of the work is to direct offer change and achievement. If there's more scope, it's not interesting. That's, there's 325,000. But if they're designing aspects into
I think so, I understand that, and I think it's part of these words like, give their opportunity, right, because we're doing improvements anyway. Why not, if it might be within a budget, right, that we could make minor adjustments to the law itself. So yeah, I see this opportunity, so already doing work in there, even if right now, the scope of work is just a replace. But does it have to be, could it be a little bit bigger to actually get the types of products that are gonna be safe for students?
Change, I'm still trying to lower something so space. This, would it change how you order lockers? The worst case, sounds like just get one lead item. Into the inventory. Is that the exact expenditure, or is it all construction?
It's all the construction.
Yeah, so
That's a little bit.
people can split, and to say, go ahead and order. So we understand long lead items, tariffs and issues all hanging over the heads. So get in place, and then it gives you more time to discuss. So what, how, right?
unfortunately, the only reason I can't. Where say $100,000, then it's a redesign of the park. That is like to this program. That's I can with that. I love your thinking. That's trying to do but if you have to.
Those buildings, all of you like on ships and
That's, I guess let me ask you a question, in the conversation around this adjustment, did gender inclusion come up?
I do not know, I will have to follow up with that conversation, to see what has transpired. I was trying to find the RFP that we issued.
How long has it been? How long has it been? It used to be this couple of years. This project.
It was planned, but I don't know the details of it. So.
I was on that big list of future projects, I think it was presented last year, but it was down the list, it was future project.
And I think maybe this chick says that we need to have some, and maybe they did, right? Say no, right, so maybe there were conversations. You know, and again, I know I'm talking about gender right now, this is like really personal for me, right? Especially right now, it is our policy, right? So if that is not coming up in conversation, then we're not following our own policy, and that's a problem, right? And so, you know, if it was talked about, and I mean, again, it's easy. It feels really complicated because we're getting in our own way about it, but it is actually really easy. So if the conversation was had and the decision was made that, oh, that was too hard, then I think that's information that the board should know. So that then we can say, we can provide our own research, right, and understanding and examples of why it's not hard, but it's our policy and state law that says that we have to do those things. And so if that's not even a part of the conversation, then we need to go back to square one. We need to have that conversation and then say, right, so every single building project, what are the culturally responsible considerations that we have to think about when designing space?
And yeah, if there's a list of these projects, just in general, whenever we get one of these projects or approval, it's help us have that. Just the other thing I was kind of curious, I was looking at some of these bids. I understand, I think it's state law that we have to take those bids, something like that, but there's pretty widespread, and I get a little nervous, you know, always picking the lowest. Especially if we haven't, and it kind of gets to the question what was considered. So what is it? What was actually in the RFP? Because that's the only way. I mean, since I think we're required to do those bids, then that means the RFP has to be written really well, so that we can't kind of shortchange us, do cheap stuff. So, okay, another.
So the question is, do you want to draw the motion, or do you want to do approval with proviso? Therefore, they can't spend it or do anything unless X is completed. And I'll tell you that I'm at least informed, if anyone really knows what the locker rooms look like, the typical, not totally like everybody's out of lots of areas. That's not covering.
There's bathrooms like with stalls. The locker rooms I don't think need to be improved. They're fine. I'll agree that like inclusivity is probably an issue, but like I was in there first semester this year. They were completely, the locker room looked completely fine. It looked new. And Foster, and in middle school, I remember what locker rooms looked like. They're fine.
I was over there like not even that long ago at Showalter. They look pretty fine. They look great actually. They still have a bathroom with a door over there and they have stalls and stuff. I was there like I think a few weeks ago. They look fine from what I see, and the lockers look great too. I don't think they really need to be. I mean, obviously with and stuff like that.
Are they padlock lockers or?
They're the ones that with the like foundations.
Yeah, they're the ones with the foundation ones.
So I think I understand is that the condition of the locker rooms are enough to last another year to potentially look at the status of the
They look the complete same from when I went there. Like,
Yeah.
They look the same.
The locker rooms, they look like locker rooms, they serve a purpose, and last I checked, the middle school locker room, like, people had places where they could change, like, there's a wall with the showers where you can go behind, and like, if you wanted privacy, that's where you could go.
Or it's like this.
And in Foster, we are not required to change out of our everyday clothing to do PE classes, so that's not a problem for PE classes, that is a problem for the sports team.
Yes.
I'm willing to try.
So that means we're back to the, we've motioned and seconded for the approval of the resolution as it stands. Sorry, yeah, yes. Okay,
So I'm withdrawing the motion, so it doesn't have. It's just, if they want to withdraw it. It won't make it in time for the year.
Well, I think we should motion though to postpone it, and otherwise just start.
So, at the point on the floor, I'm just getting a motion to postpone till next board meeting.
Uh, do you think we can have some of that information back by the next meeting, so they can make one day the next? So we can next. I'll second that. All in favor?
Alright,
I have one suggestion, just for the future RFPs around sex improvements that we include are, these are the gender, that they read that policies, yes, they have specs for that, for all, especially if we move towards levy and fund movement. And then also make sure our equity analysis is a component of that as well. So our equity analysis process and gender inclusive policy part of our future reviews, so that we can have that as part of the conversation. Designing that part of the goals at the beginnings.
I just want to thank. Finance is good.
I guess we have to do, people do the same thing, I need a motion for the phone. Okay, great.
I'll move the. Make a motion for the resolution.
Okay, I'll second the motion.
Discussion is. Postpone it.
Second that. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. I was gonna apologize. These are important things. All right. So that brings us to our opportunity for public comment. I know that there are several people to do that, and then of course folks joining us online. So if you're joining online, you can raise your hand. You can also type your name into the chat. Okay, we're gonna start with folks who are here in person. All right, so first we have Sinamata, no, excuse me, Sinamanata, is that right? Please come on up, and I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Good morning. My name is Sina Tawata Peter, but people call me Sina for short. I'm a parent with 4 kids. One that attend Foster High School, and then I have 3 that in elementary school at Cascade Elementary. I'm here, was a last minute thing where I was here or at my PTO craft that's happening today at our Cascade Elementary. But I decided to come to represent our MLL here today. I know that you guys have a letter that's already been emailed to you both, but I wanted to read it so that people here and as well as Zoom could hear what. So I am here on behalf of Cascade View as well as the MLL. To Dr. Conti Pedrosa as well as the Chapula School Board. Following the most recent school board meeting on April 22nd, 2025, the staff at Cascade View has urged the MLL team to write a letter to you informing you of the essential work the MLL ESPs do to support students learning in and out of the classroom. Our MLL ESPs have served students for many years, both as MLL paras and literacy paras, and are instrumental in helping students develop their reading skills. In their current role as MLL ESPs, they have learned and implemented GLAD strategies and instructions to support our multilingual and linguistically diverse students, making a significant impact on their learning. Please read the information below about our MLL program at Cascade View and our MLL. Lee Aliana and Ms. Elvedina Islam Basic, who is here today. We shared at the board meeting, Cascade View currently has 306 MLL students enrolled in school this year. We continue to have new students registering each week, and our numbers are even higher than they were last year. This year, our school has welcomed 90 newcomer students in the first and fifth grades. Newcomers have been in the United States for less than a year. Many of the students have had their education interrupted or have had no prior schooling. These do not include the 50 MLL kindergarten students enrolled this school year. Additionally, our school has 145 MLL students who have been in the US for less than 2 years. Due to the varying levels of education among our students, the MLL team has worked diligently to meet their needs through various targeted instruction methods, small group instruction, co-teaching, and push-in instruction. Because each class needs are different, our instruction varies for each class. The MIL team utilizes students' data to plan instruction and collaborates with classroom teachers to develop instructional strategies based on grade level content. Our MIL ESPs are directly involved in designing and implementing targeted instructions for our students. Lead Aliana has worked for the district for more than 27 years, supporting and helping students. She has worked closely with teachers in various capacities and knows what it takes to achieve academic success. Elvedina Islamabase has extensive experience working with students and assisting them with reading as well as supporting multilingual language learners students. She has taken English language learner endorsement classes and is currently pursuing her teaching credential. Elvedina was also a teacher in Bosnia for 8 years. These two ESPs have years of experience and possess the necessary tools and skills to support our MLL students. We recognize that this is a challenging time for a school district and difficult decisions must be made. However, we urge you not to make a decision that will negatively impact students' learning. Please reconsider the plan to eliminate the MLL ESP positions. This decision to eliminate the MLL ESP position will affect not only the MLL team, but also the classroom teachers. We, the MLL team and the Cascade staff are open to discussing the MLL program at Cascade View and answering any questions you may have. Please don't hesitate to contact us. And also, for me being a parent, as well as the president for our PTO at Cascade View, as well as volunteering myself as a PAC member. I believe that, speaking as a parent, that, losing the MLL is like losing students that have had a connection with them. Also, I understand that you guys are talking about Title III, that you guys are cutting the funds. You guys are cutting the funds. Why hire 5 more staff when you guys can put that funds towards the MIL teachers? They have worked constantly hard. I volunteer myself at the Cascade View, watching all these staffs that I have here today, put in so many work, so many dedication in the school. If we were to lose them, how are we gonna better our community? How are we gonna better the learning of the students? We have the most students with so many different languages. My kids, for example, have attended last year the reading intervention in the morning with Ms. B. My kids learn a lot with the reading from the intervention. And then now that you guys have taken that away from the students, there's not that much of learning. And if you guys were to take away the position of the MIL, the staff can only do so much with the students. So as a parent and for you folks, I hope that you guys can hear it in our voice. Because I know I can't do it on my own. I depend on the staff. Because they're there for a reason. They're there for our kids. Without them, where's everybody gonna be at? Because you guys are cutting so many programs. What are we supposed to do? We as a parent have to work. We have to support our kids. We have to be able to just like you all. That's sitting in front of us. So why take that away? These teachers, these ESP that's here, I've seen how hard they work. I've seen the dedication that they put in the students. I don't get paid to do PTO stuff. I do it because I care for the students. And I'm here for the students as well as the staff. But I thank you guys, for listening, and I hope that you guys take that and consider it to understand where and how much this MIL does a lot for us.
Okay, next up we have the.
Morning. My name is Lee Abrama. I'm one of the 7 MLO ESPs that was affected by this visual supplemental shift. As was mentioned at the last school board meeting, the 7 MLO cuts was a total surprise to all of us. It would be like finding out that this meeting was scheduled yesterday, Friday, after everyone has gone home to start her weekend. It feels like another surprise. We know that our friends and colleagues would have attended on Zoom or in person even sooner. Our 2 MLO teachers, Ms. Megan Brewstertown, is at Wabash training today in Bellevue. Right now, and Ms. Christy Johnson, along with many of our CP staff and friends, are getting ready for our CP spring craft fair. I gotta say, Ms. Johnson did step in for a little bit, but she had to leave to set up for the craft fair. As for me, I had plans to take my 87-year-old mother to watch her great grandson, my grandson, play in his baseball tournament in Kuala today, which is happening right now as we speak. Instead, I have to explain to them why I will not be able to be there. And it's important for me to be here advocating for our MLO positions, because it's important to stand up for what is right and what you believe in. I also understand that you probably have plans for the weekend with your loved ones but we are here instead. I, along with other MLO ESPs and MLO teachers, work tirelessly Monday through Friday to support our MLO population, especially our newcomers, most who don't speak any English when they come to us. Our job is to teach them the tools and strategies they need to be successful as they continue to learn the English language and how to read, so that one day they will become the scholars you all talk about. I want to share how many hours I work. I work 6.5 hours per day, minus my 15-minute break, 30-minute lunch break, which means about 5 hours and 85 minutes working with our kids, testing, doing data entry, and collaborating with teachers. a week, which is 29 hours and 25 minutes a week. You multiply that by 180 days in the school year, it totals 5,265 hours supporting our most vulnerable students. I just wanted you to be aware of how much time we put in our day for the school year. I've also heard about the Tukwila Promise mentioned several times at the last school board meeting. A new program launched last month between Tukwila School District, City of Tukwila, and Highline College to provide financial resources and support for our Foster High School graduates transitioning to Highline College. It aims to make higher education more accessible by covering tuition and fees for eligible students. I think this is a very great program for our Foster High School students. But in order for our younger students to achieve that dream in the future, they need to learn the English language and read at grade level, which will not happen if they are moved on year after year, still reading at a primary level, which we are experiencing right now as newcomers come in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. By the time they go, our 5th graders go on to middle school, they're still reading at kindergarten level. So when do they catch up? When they have to learn core curriculum, which is what we expect them to learn, but it has to be differentiated by the teachers. We, as MLL ESPs, do this work so our MLL students will one day be those scholars that benefit from the Tukwila Promise program. I hope you will take what I have said along with what the others have spoken to into consideration regarding how these cuts will affect all of us, especially our students and their families. Thank you for your time. I do have one more question that Ms. Johnson had written for me to ask. She had to leave. Her question is, how do we serve the needs of our newcomers? At CV, 25% of our 1st through 5th grade students. Newcomers equal students in school less than 1 year. Those are questions that she would like to have answers to another time. Thank you again.
One more in-person comment and then like she will find. So
Hello, I'm Dalton Rockwell, the teacher at CV. Thank you all for being here and listening to our concerns. Did want to say, because I wrote it down, I'm sorry, I've always been a scholar as a student. And I want to recognize that all that's a part of their achievement of this. The first being NLL, which I know a lot of people have spoken to as well. I looked up how a philosophy be implemented to make sure many things said it's sure it reflects the community's needs and values and empowers members to actively participate. That's important. It does not feel like we have been empowered, not even those most closely connected to this department. It appears nobody at the school level has even asked to participate in creating this change. And really, it's the personal connections we all have to individuals with these positions, people. We know them, we trust them. They live in this community. Their kids have gone to these schools. Some of them have been doing this for decades. One example from my school, CV, Ms. Aliaga, who you just saw. If I had gone to CV as a student, Ms. Aliaga could have been my teacher. That's how long she's been here. The commitment to this district is unquestionable. The connections made are irreplaceable. I'm sorry, but it does not matter how talented a certificated teacher coming in might be. Cannot replace what we already have. By the way, both MLESPs at CVB are multilingual. I'm not sure how that is at their schools, but ours with languages that are students. If you want to shift philosophy long term, Chuck staff, I'm sure could get behind that. But making this change right now without transition time, without buy-in, while we are already losing other staff just from budget cuts, which as far as I can tell, this is not a budget problem, this is a philosophy shift. So it's just not going to go. Morale will go down even more than it already has. We all know that's the case. It's just a hard time, and nobody will be motivated to implement this. Please hold off on this change and get feedback from those affected. If all of us will need to be MLL teachers, then let us be a part of the implementation. Thank you. My second one is for the cuts for the preschool, ESP, and assistant teacher hours. I specifically say I don't know if I understand completely, but my general understanding is preschool ESPs and assistant teachers in preschools will be losing pay on Wednesdays when there are no students in schools. That's my understanding. Immediately, I'd like to say just please don't do this. Simply. These jobs are too hard, they're too important to do this to these individuals, to people in these positions. There are many practical reasons for this. They get no planning time the other days. This is the day they plan, they gather the materials, create the activities. These ESPs work much closer with their head teacher than the ESPs do in the general ed K-5 classrooms. So they are much more involved in collaboration. They're not simply coming in and leaving. That's not the same thing as what the other ESPs do. Not that their jobs aren't important, it's just that it's more collaborative. They need that time. But the most important thing is they support our youngest and highest needs students. Our students' first experience with school, the very first time they'll ever come to school. We have 3 preschool classrooms with CV. All of the staff are treated. I would like to highlight though our early education special ed class, preschool class. My very first job in education was actually as a para sub in a high needs preschool, or sorry, it wasn't preschool, K2 class. It is still the toughest job I've ever had in education. That's no lie. It's the toughest job I've ever done. These students are all wonderful individuals, as all of our students are, but they often have challenges that others don't. Our ESPs hand feed them, clean them, take them to the bathroom, change their diapers, and are there every minute to make sure the scholars are safe to themselves and others. They are up and down all day. They're holding their hands, tracking them wherever they go. And that's just the everyday. In the last few years, they have had multiple teachers come in and out. Some of the ESPs are the most consistent staff in the classroom. They've been there longer than anybody. During COVID, this class was only closed for a few weeks and came back in person way before any other class in anywhere in this district. A few weeks. Remember that time? No one was even thinking of going back to school in a few weeks, not online, but they were there in person. So, just last year when CV was getting new students almost every day at the beginning of the year, some of our ESPs were asked to work with the toughest scholars coming in, and they did not, and they did. Even going to other schools to help support students. We would go between schools, students that are not in their designated job. They did it anyway. They have stepped up when this district asked them to. After their job as ESPs, some are parents with students in this school district. They work other jobs. I've heard that many of you have been to. They're going to school to get their teacher certs. And every single one of them in this specific class is a woman of color. Every one. Our district says it is a champion of equity and diversity. This decision does not feel like that at all. I honestly feel like it is disrespectful to the years of service they have provided in a job that most people sincerely do not have the capacity to do. I don't, I'm the first person to admit that, I cannot do that job. I would go back to that same classroom every once in a while for a couple of days when I first started, and that's all I can take. It's too hard. So I don't believe most people can do it, not every day, not for years on end, I don't. I know money needs to be saved, but this is not the way to do it. Please reconsider this decision and stand up for the values this district says it wants to embody. It's the decisions made in the tough times that show what our values truly are. Thank you.
Right, and online, we have first Courtney Martinez, just a second. Sir. Courtney should be able to.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So I have two public comments. One is a letter on behalf of the Thorndike Race and Equity team, and then one will be a personal statement as an individual. So my name is Courtney Martinez. I am a co-lead at Thorndike for our Race and Equity team. We drafted a letter in regard to the recent understanding of the multilingual learner at ESP positions being cut. To the superintendent and school board members, we are writing to express our strong support for multilingual learner educational support professionals within our district, whose positions are under consideration for elimination. These roles are essential to the academic success, cultural identity, and overall well-being of our ML students. Eliminating them would counter the district's anti-racist goals and commitments. As educators, we have witnessed firsthand the critical role these professionals play in the success and well-being of our ML students. In our April agenda for the Race and Equity team, as a district directive, we were tasked with discussing how we disrupt racist systems. We started our discussion by reviewing our Tukwila School District anti-racist statement, specifically the recruitment and retention of diverse staff. In Washington State, roughly 24% of all ESPs are BIPOC versus only roughly 12% of certificated staff being BIPOC. There is a higher likelihood that the ML ESPs reflect the identity, language, and experiences of our ML students. To cut these educators simply for not holding a teaching certification deeply undermines the cultural and racial component of having educators in buildings that look and speak like our students. The rationale given, a philosophical change, demands critical reflection. If the philosophy of our district is evolving, it should be towards restoring vital student supports that have been previously lost. SEL-focused roles, drama and theater programs, more family liaisons, and continued robust ML staffing. This shift should not be used as a justification for cutting essential personnel who already provide critical, relevant, high-impact services to some of our most vulnerable students. Let us be very clear. A degree or certification does not define a person's ability to support, teach, and uplift ML students. We also reviewed our anti-racist goals, specifically anti-racist policy review and advocacy, regularly review and revise district policies to align with anti-racist principles, and advocate for systemic change. A degree does not define how much knowledge, skill, or capacity a person has for supporting ML students. For example, we have ML ESPs in our district who have been in their position for over 20 years. It is prejudicial to say that they do not have the skills, knowledge, and/or ability to best serve their students simply because they do not hold a teaching credential, and falls directly in line with white supremacy culture, only one right way, either or thinking, worship of the written word, and sense of urgency. We also want to remind the board of TEA CBA Article 8 duration, which references the district's commitment to restoring ML programs. This is a moment to act on that promise, not just in word, but in deed. Last year, every school already lost some ML positions due to binding conditions. We have been forced to try to close opportunity gaps with less educators. Opportunity gaps that would be smaller to date should we have had the one ESP per every 100 ML students as agreed to in our CBA. If we are truly committed to equity and anti-racism, we must ask ourselves, how does cutting more ML ESP positions, the roles that center and support our multilingual communities, align with that mission. MLESPs do more than support language acquisition. They embody trust, cultural connection, relationships, and advocacy for multilingual families. Cutting these positions while claiming to disrupt racist systems is a contradiction. These proposed cuts are not just staffing changes, they are a reflection of deeper systemic issues and raise serious concerns about racial equality and the commitment our district made to being anti-racist. We are demanding justice, consistency, and integrity. Our students deserve educators who understand them, who reflect their identities, and who stay. Let's stop these cuts and start acting like an anti-racist district in more than words. Sincerely, Thorndike Race and Equity Team. I also, as an individual, I would like to address the PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to highlight specifically slides 14 and 15, where Thorndike had a high amount of growth. That is due to an ESP. I can't attest to every school, but our ESPs have a wealth of knowledge and are able to support. Also going back to the PowerPoint presentation, I don't recall the slide number specifically, but it was about the MLL Policy and Practices Guide. It was from page 67. Is also in that same 100-page document. It's in chapters 2 and 4, where OSPI does give guidance that we can have ESPs in these roles, that it's critical, specifically, I'll quote from chapter 4, it's critical that professional learning for ML teachers, classroom teachers, and paraeducators who work with multilingual learners is a critical part of every program and is required by state and federal law. Professional development must be ongoing and of sufficient duration and intensity to have an impact on instruction. So my challenge to our district is that instead of cutting and eliminating these individuals who have a wealth of knowledge already of the inner workings of our district, let's invest in them. Let's give them the same professional development opportunities that we are giving our and our certificated staff. Again, reflecting back on the data from the graphs, our ML ESP, Sharon Shipman, she has attended GLAD trainings, and you can see the increase in scores when we include our ESPs as professionals, and we bring them to the table and provide them with the tools and resources so that they can do their job as effectively as they can. Let's take the time to give the investment in our current community instead of getting rid of them in lieu of different community. Thank you for hearing both Race and Equity Team's statement today and my personal statement.
If there's anyone else online that comment, you can raise your hand, chat. If I may, just want to say a few things. I think the first and what feels like the most important to me is that I think what's become most evident, right, over last meeting and this meeting, what we heard from folks is that communication has been communication and collaboration is not what the board expects. I know that myself and I think many other folks sitting at this table that we do have a strong expectation that the superintendent brings stakeholders along the way, right? Schools, school leaders, stakeholders. And there is a MLL committee, right? It's intended to support this work and guide the direction of the work that we're doing. And so it's one of the things I think I would ask is that maybe we get a little bit more information about what has taken place, right? There's definitely always a middle place, right? Some truth somewhere in the middle, right? And so I want to make sure that we're getting an understanding about what the communication was, so that we could really identify where the gaps were. So there's that, and I think it's always just important to truth matters, right? Facts are important as well, and so, just to name a few things, I know if this meeting felt last minute, it was the agenda item, right, because it was emergent, right? It came up at our last meeting, and we said, hey, we can keep this on our next meeting. This meeting though, this date has been on the calendar since August 27th of last year when we approved our board. So I can recognize the, what felt like the swiftness of the agenda item being attached to the meeting. But this meeting was scheduled. We certainly never intend, to, and always intention and impact are always the same, right? But it's definitely never my intention to feel like the wool was being put over your eyes, right? And that you were then scrambling. So I apologize about the swiftness of the agenda item attached. And whatever I said, this meeting is in itself wasn't new. It's been over since August. So I think I've already stated what I feel like we need from you. And I also just want to acknowledge that, you know, if what I believe about you is true, you are hearing all of this as well and thinking about and considering all of the words and the impact of everything. And nothing was finalized, no decisions were made prior to our approving that resolution at our last meeting. And so conversations are still being had, decisions are still being made, and so there's lots of opportunity for everything that's been shared to be really weighted and considered as we continue to think about how we move towards greater marketing that includes everyone here and everyone else. With that, if I get a motion to adjourn our meeting. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Scott, did you just do? Did you just say?
Yeah.
Oh my God.